Welcome everyone, you're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group in Minor. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like... Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nephology podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Shivani today. Shivani, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. We've actually spent a little bit of time together this week. So we travelled down to Abu Dhabi together. We had an entertaining day trying to find our car and all those sorts of things. So that was fun.
That was quite a story.
Yeah, I do think there was one of those that if you weren't there, it probably wasn't as entertaining as it was when we were there. But so yeah, thanks for coming on. Obviously, I know a lot about you and what you guys are doing, but yeah, maybe you could give a quick intro into who you are and yeah, where you've been on the journey.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've met at my role at Pixelynx, where I'm the VP of Finance and Investments there. Where to start in my journey? So I've had almost over 10 years now of experience in finance, post-qualification. So I started off in audit, which I happily escaped to as soon as I qualified. And post-qualification, I kind of did various roles in finance. I ended up at Reckitt Benckiser, which is a FTSE 20 company. I helped them launch a fund. I worked on their divestment of one of their businesses to a Chinese private equity company, and also did their financial reporting to the markets. And that kind of really whetted my appetite for like the startup world, really. They were doing some really exciting stuff in terms of they were investing in new D2C companies, which was the hype in terms of e-commerce. So that really whetted my appetite, and that was 21.
Okay.
So that was really when the crypto craze started kicking off for the last cycle. So yeah, I kind of started my time grinding on whitelist, and I started advising some crypto companies, and one of them was Pixelynx. And then I helped them close their seed raise. They raised about 5 million with some big VCs. So I had Animoca Brands leading, Outlier Ventures, Niantic, who the makers of Pokemon Go, Republic, Spermion. So that was a great journey, and then moved to America with Pixelynx, where we went in day one. I thought I'd kind of escaped all the big company kind of deals, but no, day one I was back on a new deal, which was closing the Series A round for Pixelynx. And we closed that with Animoca Brands, which did a majority acquisition of the company.
Amazing.
And then, we scaled up. So went from about one person to, I think, almost 50 headcount. Scaled the business globally. Like we were headquartered in LA because we're a music and entertainment company. And from there we kind of just built, and then we kind of scaled down with the bear market, and we pivoted the company. We initially were a gaming company, a music gaming company. We pivoted to being a AI music creation platform, like creating interactive experiences. Our co-founders are Deadmau5 and Richie Horton. So really exciting like industry to work in. And moving to LA was so much fun, and getting to work in the music industry was a lot of fun. And also getting to be mentored by like some of our incredible founders, whether that's like, for example, Dean Wilson, who's Deadmau5's manager. He's a serial entrepreneur. Ben Turner as well, who I've got like a long background with as well. He's the manager of Richie Horton. And obviously Inder, the CEO and founder as well. Just got to learn an incredible amount from all of them. And I think Inder's vision is just so inspiring, like to go from an idea in a notebook to, raising an incredible amount of capital in a short time and scaling in a business. And, 3 to 4 years is just incredible. And I think, you'll be able to identify with me, but I'm a very British person. I've always been very pessimistic about things. I'm always a glass half full kind of person. And I think, in there's like optimism, and I think being in a startup, you really have to believe in like, really believe in yourself and what you're building, and, believe that you're going to be that 1 in 10 that's going to be successful. So that really helped me to change kind of my mindset, and that's something I work on all the time, which I think you have to when you're working in cutting edge technology, 100%. Trying to build new business models.
People are always telling you can't do it in a way.
Exactly,
like, even if it's not specifically to you, it's the industry itself, people are saying blockchain won't work, crypto's a fad, all those sorts of things. So yeah, you definitely have to keep fighting against that kind of negativity, if you like.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And you touched on when you were at your previous kind of FTSE 20 company, and then kind of crypto came into your life. How did crypto come into your life? I don't even think I know this, but how did crypto come into your life?
Well, it really came from my husband, to be honest. He kind of got me into it. He was doing some trades. And then I started there was all these projects coming up. I think one of the ones that I really identified was World of Women.
Okay, yeah.
And they were just launching. So I was like grinding for whitelist, like on Discord, what it was like back in the day, and really kind of feeling that power of Web3 communities. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of people there, and it was, meeting some amazing women in the space. So that's how I got started, really. It's pretty funny because, like, the first NFT I got, I actually wasn't even able to keep it for more than 24 hours because I got hacked as soon as I bought it.
God. Hopefully it wasn't too high value.
No, it was about, I think back then it was about $1,000, but
okay, so still quite a lot.
Yeah, but it was just funny because I fell for like the classic issue, which is someone messaged me on Discord to do link your wallet to like verify once I bought this NFT, and I followed it, and then I got hacked. So that was quite
baptism of fire, as they say.
Yeah, baptism of fire. Day one, I'm like grinding, finally get an NFT, and I get hacked.
But it does, like, genuinely though, on that point, it does happen to the best of us in a sense, right? We can be as sensible or as kind of diligent or whatever. And I remember, it was about 2 years ago. I was actually in Dubai on holiday before we moved here, and it was actually the Sandbox, another Animoca company. Well, I don't think it was them, but there was this thing about this Sandbox airdrop. Like, we worked with them. Like, I kind of knew they weren't doing an airdrop at this particular point, but it was early in the morning. My wife and kids were like, we got to go out for breakfast and all those sorts of things at the hotel. And I'm like, oh yeah, but I want to get this airdrop. So I'm like, I connected my wallet 4 times. 4 times it failed. Each time it was draining a token out of my wallet, right?
Oh,
and and you have that sinking feeling of like, how on earth have I managed to let myself? But from that moment, I have a couple of wallets on my phone, but I don't have many on my phone at all, because if you have to load up your computer, connect your wallet, like, it's kind of like a savings account with a 30-day period that you've got to get it out of, right? You go, oh, I've got to wait 30 days, I may as well not bother. If you've got instant access to your savings, you might dip in and out. So it's the same here now with crypto. I'm quite strict with, like, if it's got value. There are stuff that I've got on my phone because I need to move stuff around more quickly, but in the main, I'm like, it's got to be away from like that quick, easy mistake, as it were.
Yeah. So definitely. I think we've all been there, but I think it's a really good point because it's a really big blocker for onboarding mainstream. And when we think about what the biggest challenges are for the Web3 ecosystem, it's really onboarding audiences. Like right now, the biggest issue is that the audience we have is mostly like speculators. So really, if we want to onboard like the masses to come into Web3, we need to make this, user experience, the UI, just a seamless onboarding experience. Not where you're going to get hacked by like clicking a wrong link. I think, almost everyone that I know who's in crypto has been hacked once at least. And I think, it's something, it's kind of part of the journey of like joining the space.
And you do have to like, it's like, if you grew up in a rough neighborhood and you walk around with a Rolex on your wrist, and then all of a sudden someone beats you up and steals your Rolex. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm not saying it should happen to people, but you don't do the same thing again. Do you know what I mean? Like,
exactly,
so you do learn from it, or if you don't, then, what do they say? If you make a mistake once, it's a learning thing. If you make it twice, it's stupidity or something like that. So, it is, and there are circumstances. I've got a mate who's been hacked like 5 times, and it's just pure stupidity.
Yeah.
Every time he's like, I shouldn't have done that. But like, and sometimes you can get, tricked and stuff. But so I guess moving on to Pixelynx and core protocol. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, because I love what you guys are doing, and how, from my perspective, it's a real world kind of use case for blockchain, crypto, etc. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, definitely. Core protocol's been a labor of love. Like, we've been building it for over 2 years now. And what it is, it's an IP infrastructure that we're building and a whole ecosystem. And we're building it to help protect IPs that are coming on chain, to allow you to monetize them in different and new ways, and also have new distribution paths, whether that's through like Telegram gaming or like different things. So it's basically to encapsulate all of those. And it's really exciting. Like the protocol is focusing on music and entertainment. So the IPs we already have are the Black Mirror, which is a Netflix IP. Pixelynx took it on chain earlier this year, and we sold out the collection within, I think, 2.5 hours or something. And it was one of the most successful mints on base.
Amazing.
And this was before the base kind of had like, it had really kicked off. So that was really exciting. And it's more of an experience than it is in terms of just being like a PFP kind of project.
And it's funny actually, because I'm in your Discord and every now and then I look at these things and I'm like, oh, I wonder if I should get involved. And then but for me, it's not my it's not my passion, that side of things. So I'm like, oh, sorry, because it's not a PFP, which actually means that people like me aren't just going into it from a speculatory perspective. We would go into it because we want to, or we won't go into it because we don't, which is totally fine as well. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, we've just launched yesterday actually. We just launched our AI chatbot experience with it, and we have some really exciting plans that are with like AI agents and different things for it in the next couple of months. So we're really building around the storytelling, and that element's really important. And then we have like Mousetrap, like Dead Mouse's record label. We have Plastic Man, like Richie Hawtin's record label. Imogen Heap's an advisor. She's also brought her music onto the protocol. Dixon as well, who's like another famous artist. So we've got some really great, you know, artists that have come on, and some really great entertainment IP. And, you know, when we think about IPs and when we think about kind of where we're going next, there's so much opportunity. And with Core Protocol, it's backed by some of the biggest names. So Animoca Brands, Republic, Sfermion, like Outlier Ventures, they're all backing it. And we've got, you know, listed IP, like, you know, Black Mirror IPs from a listed company.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So we're really working with some of the most exciting IPs. And what I really see is that, you know, as we move into the world of AI, there's so much opportunity to create like UGC with AI. But the issue is that like IPs like Black Mirror or any other IP you might have, there's issues with like, you know, how do they benefit? So how can they take their IPs into this new world, whether they approve or don't approve, because it will happen illegally, and still be able to retain their rights as their creator and allow people to create like in new ways, which is where it's moving. And that's where like I think AI and crypto go hand in hand, because you've got AI creating like the abundance of like new ways to use the IP, whether that's allowing your fans to create new songs and remixes, or taking the Black Mirror IP and creating new storylines that they all build on as a community together. But then you still have the license attached to it on chain, and that license tells you exactly what the creator will and will not allow while using that IP. And anything new that's created, the creator holds the rights within that. And then whoever's created anything new, they have a right in it as well. So then you have the revenue splitting, which is done like automatically through the protocol. So that's a really important part. And then if we look at crypto, like, you know, what you see now is everyone is just launching a token. Like, why do you need it? But the crypto is a really important layer because it adds the verification layer. Like, you know, you've got this abundance of these new IPs and these new experiences or new formats that are being created, but what's real and what isn't real, right? So that's where we have crypto come in. It provides a really important verification layer. So often people talk about, you know, AI and crypto as like buzzwords together, but they actually do really go hand in hand when you look at like the real cases. And
I totally agree. And let's take an artist for example, right? So let's just use Dead Mouse as an example. What's the benefits of someone like him bringing his IP on chain? Like what's he getting out of it, besides the kind of maybe the obvious side, but like what's he getting out of it?
I think it helps to maybe have like a bit of context as to what's going on in the music industry right now. So in the music industry right now, the artists make the majority of their income from touring and then sponsorships. Like how much money they make from like recordings is really small. And that's because we live in the streaming era. So you could have a song that you're streaming for, I don't know, a year and still barely make any income from it. Whereas with this, with like what we've built, you could bring your song onto our platform and you can, it's quite technical, but you can create whole new experiences, whether they're interactive with the artist, which we've just done with Imogen Heap. And you can remix different elements of the song. And all of that is kind of contained within the license. So it's really powerful in that sense. You can create all these different remixes and the revenue you create. So for example, for an artist, they're making like a couple of thousand, maybe over a year. You could make the same amount and much more just from one experience. So that's what's really powerful, is that at the moment, artists really only have a couple of avenues to make money, which is touring.
Which takes a lot of time.
Takes a lot of time, and sponsorships, and making money from like streaming is really difficult. So they can come in, create an experience and make the same money that take them might be a year in like one day.
And why is it that they don't make any money on streaming? Is it because the pay per stream is so low?
Small. Yeah.
And is that because now we're in this streaming world that, you know, I might have driven here today and played a particular song that was from 20 years ago, for example.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more, like, whereas let's say 10 years ago, I'd have had to have had that CD or whatever in my car to play it. Whereas now I can choose whatever song I want from. Is that why that it's so much more available?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So if you think about it, like, you know, back when there were CDs, you were paying, what was it, like £4 for a single and then £10 for an album. And I don't know what that is in today's numbers with inflation. But
it's mental when you say it like that, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and now you pay like £10 for a Spotify subscription per month to have unlimited access to all music, all artists. So when you think of it like that, you can see that, you know, the amount that you need to stream for artists is so high. And then if you think about like democratization as well in terms of for creators, because that's what Core Protocol really is. It's like, it's really trying to create like value and help creators to retain the value. So if you're a big artist, whether it's Deadmau5 or Imogen Heap, or if you're a really small artist, you can put your music on the protocol. And, you know, say if you're a small artist, small creator, and you only have a couple of hundred people buying, you're still able to make a living from that. Whereas if you go into the traditional route, you have to have, you know, all the different levels of bureaucracy, even if you're an independent artist, to kind of release a song. That's really difficult. And then streaming it, getting it onto the platforms, whether it's SoundCloud, Spotify. So then you automatically have more opportunities.
So is that the other side to it, is that the cost, if you like, to the artist? And by cost, I mean, you know, Spotify take their cut.
Yeah.
You know, so-and-so takes their cut, so-and-so takes their cut. And in the end, this small figure that started at the top becomes even smaller at the bottom because of the layers. And also to get it onto Spotify, it's probably got to go through certain things and all those sorts.
And also it's the timeline.
Yeah.
So if you look at like the timeline to receive royalties on recordings, you're talking about months.
Yeah.
Like it's done in like usually in quarters. You get statements and then it's paid out maybe 3 months. Whatever they pay out usually is never correct. It's like a black box. Like you never really understand the calculations. So if you're a small artist, you know, not making a huge amount of money, you've got a long lead time to wait until you're going to get that. And your song has to be hugely successful for it to be worth anything, you know. So, and then you've got publishers and you've got various people taking percentages. So it's really challenging.
And I guess you're also, like you just said, you're at the mercy of these big corporates that tell you what you've earned, or effectively what songs have been played. And then you've got to, how on earth do you disprove that if you think that it's wrong?
Yeah.
You know, obviously if there's a huge discrepancy, you know, if you're Eminem, for example, and they say you've done 50 streams in a month, it's obviously not true. But like, you know, if you are a kind of smaller artist, it'd be very difficult, I guess, to challenge Spotify, for example, on the streaming numbers or whatever, right?
Yeah, and you would be surprised. Like even a lot of the bigger artists, like they all usually do like audits,
Right?
because like I say, like the numbers are often not right. So they often have their teams do an audit once a year.
So there's
and
cost to that. There's time to that.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is what, like, if we think back, like, what is Web3 about? It's really about owning your own data and owning your own like I guess just ownership.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do for creators, like allow creators to retain ownership of like their creations and like benefit off of that through our protocol. And I think it's really exciting. Like we've built an incredible tech stack with some amazing partners. Things like partners like Mintangible, Sustango, where they've built in like the licensing modules within the project. So you can go in, you can upload a song or any piece of IP, and you can write in there like you would a contract, and exactly the same what you will allow people to use that IP for, and then allow people to take it and then distribute it in different ways, or they have the creation and then they can distribute it, whether it's a song to Spotify or whether it's taking the song and using it like in like the background of like a game. Or anything that you want.
If you wrote in there, I don't want this to go on Spotify, obviously that'd be a bit silly if you're an artist.
You can do.
But if you did do that, what is to stop it going? Like, is there a smart contract functionality that prevents certain things from happening, or is it more that it's kind of the metadata within the like? How does that?
Yeah, so the functionality is a bit more challenging because it's more of a tech functionality. But you would be in breach of the contract.
Okay.
So then that's kind of the biggest issue.
Okay.
I do think as the technology evolves, you'll be able to put in kind of, for example, if you're tailoring it to each artist to their requirements, if they say, okay, we don't want to use Spotify, you'll be able to just put a block on it. And that might come down the line. But right now, it's that. And there's other like software companies out there as well that do identification. So if they find, songs or things that are kind of online or like on Spotify that they shouldn't be there, they will then be able to identify that and go back identify it through AI and go back to the artist and tell them.
So it's more making the contract more transparent as well.
Yes, exactly.
At the moment, it isn't, in a way, because it's a contract that's stuffed in a lawyer's drawer. It's now a contract that's online that everyone can see effectively. Yeah,
exactly. It's a transparency of it all. If you look at what's the big advantage of like smart contracts when we think about like finance and royalties and things like that, it's the transparency and the speed. Like it takes place as soon as the creation's created and somebody makes a payment for it, that it's triggered.
It's real time.
And it's real time, and the money comes to the creator in real time.
Yeah, it's not let's get to the end of the quarter, let's tally this up, let's compare. It's there and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I do really like what you guys are doing. The other thing I wanted to touch on, I guess, was I know that you guys have launched or are in the process of launching a token.
Yeah.
Why bring a token? What's the need for a token in the ecosystem for you?
So I think for us, so we're expecting to do our public launch in Q1 next year, and the token's a really important part. I think there's been a couple of articles, and I think Yap from Animoca has spoken a lot about how the token is almost a product now in itself. And for us, the token, it has a whole ecosystem. So for Core Protocol, we have a whole ecosystem where you come in, you make creations, you can earn the token. The token can be spent on other creations. There might be other ways to be like have rewards and different things. So there's a whole, and it's kind of outlined in our white paper, but there's a whole like what we call like sinks and faucets to allow the economy to work. That's what I see the Core Protocol as. It's almost like a sovereign country that you're trying to like create, a way for people to like earn it, spend it, use it. So that's what we've created.
So it's all about that internal as well as external, but that internal, like because a lot of projects when they launch it, I guess as
Yeah.
This is a subject in itself, right, around token launches. So, some projects will launch a token purely from a speculative basis, right?
Yeah.
Some projects will launch a token because they want it to be a core functionality of what they do. So, it, like you say, the value, they want to create so much value in having the token that people don't want to sell it, right? Because they don't need to, because they're utilizing it so much within that protocol. And is that, I guess, where you guys sit, that is not in principle a speculative token, it's a token that really drives its value from using it within the protocol.
Yeah, and I think, what we spoke about with kind of the broken music industry is that what we're building solves a real problem that's out there. And it's really important that blockchain technology is used in a way that can simplify, make things much cheaper, much faster, more transparent, so that everyone can benefit. That's the key to it. I think the challenge right now is that the Web3 ecosystem is a bit broken. So we're kind of in a bit of a loop right now where the majority of the users within the ecosystem are really speculators. And it's quite a difficult ecosystem when you also look at like what our exchange is looking for. So I think if you look at tokens that have been listed this year, I think a lot of them haven't been successful, and the exchanges are actually like losing money on them, and then it's driving this kind of these really high KPIs in terms of user numbers, which often aren't fully real. So it creates this kind of broken like loop in a way, where you're trying to bring on so many users, then you can then get listed. And you're trying to maintain kind of this audience where it's split, where you have like the speculators who are often the high value like spenders, and then people who really enjoy the product and want to use the product or really want to be part of the ecosystem and enjoy being part of it. Yeah. So it's trying to balance kind of all of those different requirements to, at the end of the day, like any token project is a business. So it's trying to kind of, how do you balance like the business requirements with creating technology that people really like love, enjoy, and has real use and solves real problems, which is kind of what we're meant to be doing. And also with an ecosystem where we're struggling to onboard like the masses, and we're kind of, it's a high level of speculators. So that creates kind of a lot of challenges.
And I guess the problem is, though, we create our own problems in a sense of, you and I can sit here and say, we need more projects that build proper kind of utility around tokens, not speculation. And then on Monday, I told you about a meme coin, and you messaged me and said, I've bought into that meme coin. So we kind of create our own problem, right? Because we are speculators as well in ourselves. And so I guess that's part, like you need, like you say, it is an interesting dilemma because you kind of need both. In a way, because you need both audiences. You need the speculators, you need the fun meme coins on Solana or Base or whatever it may be, but you also need these real kind of proper projects that are creating something that the real world needs, and the token becomes a part of the ecosystem. And by holding the token, and probably as an example in a way as well, there is kind of the Bored Ape Yacht Club kind of community, right? I picked up one of those maybe 18 months, 2 years ago now. Maybe not quite that long, can't remember. But and I picked it up because I wanted to be part of the community. And I wanted to be part of the community because I wanted to engage with it, and I wanted to maybe win work from it, and I wanted to enjoy being part of that kind of community. And now I think they're very good. Like 2 of our team went to Ape Fest in Lisbon, and they're very good at creating more value outside of, outside of just the kind of NFT, if you want to call it, itself. And I think that's a good example. Whereas other NFTs out there or other projects out there, they launch something, there's no real value, there's no real roadmap, there's no real journey. And in the end, people just get bored and sell it and move on.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it also one of the biggest challenges, I think, in what you're talking about is also comes down to fundamentally like business models. So if we talk about Bored Apes, they raised 450 million at the top of the market back in, I think, 22. So they've got money to invest in really still building the community. I think they've been launching their game and they're doing some really cool stuff with their launch pad now. And they're continuing to kind of add value. But they did say earlier in this year that they've had to let go of a lot of people because they've been struggling to make it successful. And that's the thing with these other NFT projects is it's really difficult because it's, a lot of these projects launched in 21 or 22. They made money from the initial mint. Secondary sales is really difficult to make a lot of money from. But after a while, they're going to run out of money. And if you look at what happened in after like FTX and then 23, it's really difficult to sell NFTs. The market, I think there's some shocking figures. I think OpenSea was down like 90% versus like the prior year in 23. So, I know a few founders from some incredible projects, NFT projects, where they've built these incredible communities. And people are really passionate, but it's just really difficult with the business model to make it work with the NFT projects. And I think gaming's a good example as well, where, there's a lot of money raised from investors to build Web3 games. And I think everyone knows about the backlash from gamers against Web3 games. And that's been like another challenge in this space. So I think what we're seeing now is like all of those growing pains kind of coming out. The technology's come so far in like the last 2 years. And now we're in a new cycle and, costs are cheaper. We've got AI that's like reducing down barriers. But the key thing is, can we really make these business models successful?
No, I agree. And I think that some of the challenge, if you think about, let's take the metaverse as well as an example, right? And I was reading, I read this article this morning about Meta. They rebranded their whole company effectively around this thing, right? And it really has kind of died down quite a lot. But the fundamental, thing of the metaverse, or the kind of fundamental concept of some of these metaverse projects is still sound, in the sense that hasn't changed from 3 years ago. But the market went in such a downward spiral that projects like that just didn't really gain any traction. And so I think for me, part of it as well is we need to start to try, and I don't know how, decouple the speculative crypto market with the fundamentals of the projects themselves. Because if you 3 years ago, and I'm just speaking out loud, I'm not saying this is true, but if you 3 years ago decoupled the metaverse from the crypto market, would it have been more successful? Would it have continued in a certain way? Whereas because a lot of these projects were fundamentally relying on their token, or NFT projects were relying on secondary sales or whatever, they weren't innovating or whatever. Like, I don't know, would it, if we decoupled it from, a lot of businesses don't have the same, what's the word? Kind of like market shifts that businesses in crypto have.
Yeah, and I think metaverse has existed for years. You can be in a game and that's a metaverse. Roblox in itself, it's a metaverse. Grand Theft Auto, you could say, is a metaverse in itself. It didn't have to be on chain.
Fortnite's the other one my son plays.
Fortnite. I mean, Fortnite was really kind of a real disruptor in terms of, the Fortnite skins really kicked off some of the conversations in terms of like, people buying all of these digital goods that they don't have in the real world and spending so much money. And blockchain gave you that ability to, like with games like that they were trying to build, to take that value that you've accrued in these games and be able to like sell it on OpenSea to a new player, and not create these kind of walled gardens. And interoperability is, is still a bit of like years away. It's difficult to like link all the games and allow, if you buy something in Sandbox and then for you to take it to like another game, it's difficult to do that. But that's the ultimate aim. So I think the word metaverse, it's not just synonymous with crypto, even though that's what made it famous in the last couple of years. There's much more to it. And like Ready Player One's a good example. So I think we can't just, and I think that's been the issue of the last 2 or 3 years, especially since FTX, is that the whole industry got written off for like one or two bad actors. And, you know, if you look at kind of what happened with FTX, like that was just fraud.
Yeah.
Right?
It was a fundamental business fraud, not crypto.
Business fraud. So,
and actually, to one point, if more of if they had more on-chain data and information, actually it would have been much harder to be as fortunate as they were.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And it's also the same with like Bernie Madoff, for example, you know, and what he say different scenarios, but the exact same thing. They were both fraudsters. Yeah. Not anything other than that. And that's where the issue is, like you say, people look at crypto or FTX and blame crypto. But actually it's the opposite.
Yeah. And if you look at kind of where we are now in terms of the industry, it's really comparable to where we were with the internet maybe 20 years ago, because back then as well, like all of these kind of websites popped up and nobody really knew how they were going to make money from them or how they were going to continue. And then it was only kind of really after the development and, you know, being able to be interactive with those websites like Facebook, that's like Web 2.0 really, where they kind of built a business model. So I think that's kind of where the point that we're at now. We're still trying to work out how you really build like outside of, and I'm talking really about like outside of chains and things like where you can build like a sustainable business model that works for these like different types of audiences. And the key driving factor and the key kind of catalyst for that change is really going to be like the onboarding of like Web 2 users into Web 3.
I guess from my point as well around decoupling it, I guess what I would like you said, you know, even crypto, the word cryptography, you know, the basis of what we talk about existed long before Bitcoin, right? And so when I say the metaverse or whatever needs to be decoupled from the industry, what I mean by that is if the industry is taking a hit for whatever reason, and therefore the sandbox token drops a lot, and therefore people go, well, the sandbox must be a bad project, for example, because the token's dropping. That for me is a fundamental market, you know, that every token dropped, you know, during a certain period of time. So what I was, I guess, and then the problem with that is then when the token drops and people say negative things, people don't go to it, and then you've got this perpetuating cycle that actually the business model was fundamentally sound, for example, but it becomes not because of external market influence. And I think you do have that in the traditional world, of course you do, but I don't think it takes it's not quite as obvious, it's not quite as public, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we're seeing some really interesting things. So for example, if you look at Futureverse, they raised about $50 million last year, and they were kind of one of the first Web3 roll-ups they raised for. So they've got several different companies. They've got their game, they've got their AI, and they've got a few really strong communities like Fluff World, Party Bears. And they raised to basically do what I think is probably one of the first Web3 roll-ups. And then you're seeing more consolidation in this space. So Outlier Ventures have spoken quite a bit about this, how, you know, they see the market as having too many tokens now, and they see the next couple of years like a lot of consolidation. And I think a good one of that is like the Fetch AI, I think it's renamed now, token, but that ecosystem, I think that was a merger of one or two other tokens as well. So we're seeing some really interesting kind of consolidation plays and some much more thoughtful kind of pathways to kind of getting back to those like business models and providing real uses to users, and building amazing technology.
No, I agree. And I think, again, coming back to, you know, token launches and tokens themselves, it is that you can be a really good business and have a really good kind of business model and roadmap and plan. But if the market turns in a horrible way through nothing to do with you, that is a problem, isn't it? And I think that's the other thing now is how can we, in a way, see these real businesses still thrive rather than having to worry about these cycles. Because if you're a business, and you must know this being in a crypto business yourself, you know, you've always got to be thinking about the next cycle. When is the current cycle going to end? And you know, and it's not a way to run a business.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, even when we look at, I think a good example is like token launches. Like if we even look at this year, and the meta's changed so much this year. I think we started like 24 off, and, the markets were in a good place. And it was all about farming. Like there was all this farming for like Param and these different projects. And it was kind of taking over crypto Twitter to a point where you couldn't even see any of the quality posts anymore. Then the meta changed to being like Telegram games, but only tap games over the summer. And that was the new meta for like, onboarding users into the ecosystem. And now again, it feels like, the meta's kind of changed as well, leaning much more towards like meme coins and the communities around meme coins. So that's only within a year. Like if you think about a normal company or even a normal like marketing startup, their marketing spend would be planning for like, you're doing a plan, and if you do it in April or if you do it in September, maybe there is a couple of tweaks. But I mean, here you're talking about whole platforms of technology that are like completely changing in order to onboard users. So it's really difficult for like
to keep up
and making sure you're keeping up too. Like I think one of the biggest things, like obviously even though I'm on the finance side, is I try to participate in Web3 and the communities and kind of the different forms of it quite a lot throughout the year, to just help me to understand a bit more like where things are going and have a real understanding to like give a bit of color to like the numbers that I'm looking at or what I'm planning for in terms of the financial strategy.
Yeah, and I think that's another point. You mentioned like a marketing strategy, taking a financial strategy in January.
Yeah.
Versus a financial strategy for that same business. I'm sure you've gone through this process with your business. Even and that has changed significantly. The market, the market trends, and even then you do have the political stuff. Like Trump coming in has completely changed
it.
The perspective, and it was all riding in a way on that one day. If it had gone the other way, the market would not be where it is today. We probably wouldn't have $100,000 Bitcoin today.
Definitely.
So it's a very, whereas if you're take an accounting business, if Trump gets in and the markets boom, does that help? Yeah, it does, because you've got more positivity in the space, but it's not the be all and end all. If Trump hadn't got in, our business would have still, forget crypto for a minute, just talk about normal business, would have still continued. We'd still grow. We'd still do this. But in crypto, it's so different.
Yeah, definitely.
And that can change everything.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, every startup needs to be agile. They have to be ready to like pivot. But I think in crypto, you really have to have the mechanisms in place to really be able to be really agile, more than any other startup, because trends change, what's needed changes, political impacts. It's just a kind kind of evolving space. And people definitely agree.
In crypto are very fickle.
Very fickle, yeah. Very fickle.
If it's hot, it's hot. If it's not, it certainly is not.
Yeah.
So cool. So for the last kind of bit here, I wanted to kind of change, if you like, the conversation, I guess, away from crypto, but not intentionally, but more onto both of our kind of backgrounds, if you like, in terms of finance. Right. And I know you're quite a big kind of person in terms of talking about the future of finance, what that looks like, and we've spoken about it, in terms of the intersect of AI and what that's going to do, and I also believe there's elements that AI will take, there's elements I don't believe it will. So I guess where do you see the future of the kind of finance industry and whatnot?
Yeah, I think when I look at like finance and how it's evolving, like you were saying, we're at this unique point where we're seeing all these technologies come together, whether that's blockchain, AI, or like robotics, and it is fundamentally changing what it means to be a finance and accounting professional. And I think the emphasis, and this was the emphasis maybe 10 years ago as well, like when we started talking about automation, it really is in like the value add that you can do. Like the number crunching is the one that's going to go like the fastest and the first, right? Like it doesn't matter if a number goes up and down, like anyone can identify that. So it is really about kind of being able to look at the results of like data analysis and being able to pull from there what are the important value drivers from that to then be able to inform like business decisions. I think that's really important. And being able to work with all these different technologies is also really important. Like, I think for me, ChatGPT, like the access to like that has just completely changed, has been a game changer for me. And when I think about my career, I do really think of it now in terms of before ChatGPT and after ChatGPT. And, there's loads of other great models, like Claude is amazing. And obviously all this information was, it's been there for a while and these models have been there, but it was just being able to like access it in a way. And now I'm in finance, but I can do so many different things by like tapping into the knowledge within AI. I can add so much more value. So I think that's another key thing is like, whenever you're working on a piece of work, like you need to be able to like check your work and make it much more value add through these models, and whether that's anonymizing the problems and the data to like look to like help the like putting it into the model to help to understand it, or whether that's checking it against other assumptions, like wider assumptions or things you haven't thought about, or in data sets looking for patterns like early on, or there's just so many different things. Like now, like I've been getting involved in marketing, and I'm no expert in marketing, but being from someone from finance, that is never an area I would have been able to like touch. But with ChatGPT, I feel like I can do things like I'm never going to be a marketing professional, but there's things that I can do in that, and I've learned that. So that's also a really important point, because we look at future skill sets and we look at like Gen Z, they have several different skills, like what they call it, I think it's like polymath, where you learn all these different skills. You're not just like, I think our generation's much more focused on having kind of one particular skill, but they're much more entrepreneurial, and they're much more like investing into like developing several skills and doing several things. I also think the ways of working will change in the future. I think the employee model, I think, is going to be challenged. And I do see people working more on like a project basis. For different companies, and I think that's because the new generation want to be involved in lots of different things. They want to use different skills, and I think that'll be an interesting way. So I think over the next couple of years we're going to see like fundamentally the skills changing, but also the way that we work is going to be fundamentally changing. Like we're going to be working a lot more with all of these like models and different things. And
I think as well, what's really good about it, I think, in a way, I've got a friend builder, and he property developer as well, and he's getting a finance deal at the moment, and he said to me, I've just put the terms in ChatGPT just to work out what the cost is, and I've compared two deals, and can I just send it to you to have a quick look at? And the point of that is, that doesn't necessarily take my job away.
No.
What that does is it allows me to then look at the two things that he's pulled together and go, okay, I've had a look at this. I've analysed it from my brain's perspective and my knowledge as a finance person and whatnot. And then I'm able to now pick up the phone, have a conversation with him, talk it through, and we come to an answer. Whereas previously, I'd have had to have run all of those models myself.
Yeah, for sure.
And that would have taken up, let's say, he's a mate, so I wouldn't charge him. But let's say I've charged him for 2 hours worth of my time, right?
Definitely.
That's taken up an hour and a half of my time running the models. So now I've only got half an hour to talk about it. Whereas now I can spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes looking at it and having the rest of the time having that conversation. I think that's super important as well.
Yeah, and it's a good point, actually. So our COO at Pixelynx is Paul Joffe, and he's ex-GM of Sony Gaming in America. And he just wrote a book, and his book talks all about how every person can use AI in their everyday life. And it comes across against like everything, whether it's looking for a job, so putting your CV through a model, whether it's helping you to budget, helping you to work out, like, if you've got a leak in your bathroom, like taking a picture of it and putting it into the AI, what's wrong, instead of having to call someone out if it's not a real problem. So he covers like all these different use cases for AI in his book, and it talks about like everyday use cases. And when I think about now, I can't even remember the last time I used Google.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I just always use like one of the models, whether it's Claude or like ChatGPT. I just use that because I don't have to search, and it gives me such specific data that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So that's a big fundamental shift as well.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that's really important, which Paul talks about in his book, is really AI is accessible for everyone. And I think, you know, in the news at the moment, there's a lot of kind of negativity around it because people are worried that they're going to lose their jobs. And realistically, that's going to happen either way. But there's lots of new jobs that are also going to be created because there are new skills required to help build it, help maintain it, prompting it, different things. So you can either fight it or you can just kind of learn about it.
Embrace it. It's a bit like the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly.
You know, what happened before that? People worried about the jobs that would be lost and all the...
definitely.
Actually, what it did was create a whole new economy, a whole new set of jobs. And, you know, it's exactly the same here. And like you say, you know, the people that want to sit on their hands and complain will always be left at the end to, you know, wish they'd done... And they'll be the ones that complain because they'll be the ones that sat on their hands and did nothing. Whereas the people like us that embrace it, we use it in our everyday lives. And I think it was you actually that told me that about in the about section of ChatGPT, you can like give it a bit of information about you, so it can be more. And then I created a couple of my own custom GPTs. So one of them, was like a kind of personal brand one where basically I was like, this is who I am, this is what I'm trying to achieve, these are my skills. Here's some documents as well, you know, some brand documents, stuff like that. So now when I say to it, write me or rephrase this post for me for LinkedIn, it's rephrasing it with context. Yeah. So actually it's starting to...
They're really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've trained 2 or 3 GPTs. I've trained one that's like a token expert. Oh, yeah. I've trained one as well that's more of like a marketing kind of one. And another one for like personal things. They're really powerful. I think what excites me the most is also like, you know, anyone can do this. It doesn't matter if you are, you know, not as wealthy as the next person. It kind of democratizes the opportunities and barriers you have to knowledge and to learning, really. So yeah, that would be my biggest thing is just... And I think that's why Paul's book is so great, is that it really pushes people to not be afraid of, you know, these conversations around AI, but to try and embrace it and see kind of the incredible amount of knowledge that you can tap into and save money as well through using it.
And time. And it'd be amazing if you could send the link to me. We could maybe put the link in the description of the podcast for those that want to go out and buy it as well, because I think any kind of educational around real world day-to-day use for this technology is where we need to be. And don't get me wrong, I do think we need to be careful. And even I think Elon Musk came out and said we need to be careful, you know, and some of that will be, I'm sure, self-preservation for stuff that they're doing. But, you know, like we do have to make sure that we're a bit careful with it, and we don't, you know, what you don't want is a business to say, for example, I don't need an accountant anymore. I'm solely going to use a GPT because that's going to end in tears. So there's a line, and there's I guess a kind of balance between like there is in everything in life, where you go, okay, this part GPTs can help me with, this part they can't, and it's using both together rather than one or the other.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's that famous story. I think it was a rumor that was really going around, like California, about the dev that put their code from Disney into ChatGPT and got fired on the spot because they'd breached all of their contracts. So yeah, there's things that you need to be aware of, like everything, and being mindful to that is really important. But that story always makes me laugh. Yeah,
contractual obligations still ring true no matter what.
Sensitive proprietary data. You need to be careful.
You need to be careful. Yeah. Look, a really good conversation. We touched on some really interesting topics, and like I said, I genuinely really love what you guys are doing at Pixelynx and Core Protocol. So for those people that kind of want to find out more about you and about the business, like obviously we'll link some stuff in the description, but where's the best place for them to find you?
Best place to find me is probably either on LinkedIn or Twitter. I think for Pixelynx and Core Protocol, Twitter's the best place.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Shivani, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. Had a great time chatting.
Yeah, thank you.